Hello and welcome to the 1912 Exiles podcast, the original, the biggest, the best Newport County podcast made by the fans for the fans. We're brought to you by the Terrace Cymru podcast network and in association with the Riverside Sports Bar, the home of live sport and great burgers in Newport. I'm Jamie and I'm introducing this very special episode, our very first joint simulcast, as we've joined up with our rugby counterparts at the Dragons Lair pod to discuss the future of the Dragons and its wider implications. As many of you will know, the Welsh Rugby Union are considering reducing the number of Welsh rugby regions down from 4 to 2, with the Dragons looking like one of the sides which might be for the chop. But this isn't just a rugby story. If the Dragons were to disappear, there would be huge ramifications for Rodney Parade, for Newport County, for the city centre, and for local businesses as well. And we wanted to unpack all of that. So last week, actually on transfer deadline day on the 1st of September, our Ed sat down with Jamie from the Dragons Lair, not me, and with Dan from the Riverside Sports Bar, which sponsors both of our pods, for a conversation. So I'm just going to pitch over to the clip. Enjoy.
Well, here's a question for you, Jamie, to get us up and running. From an incredibly naive perspective, as someone who doesn't really watch rugby, is this a situation of chickens coming home to roost? Because when the Welsh Rugby region started in 2003, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
As a football fan looking in, it seemed absurdly optimistic to me that the WRU thought that fans of each of the old historic club sides would suddenly transfer their allegiance overnight to these kind of amorphous regional franchises. And I always thought that match-going fans would much prefer those kind of local and hyper-local derbies against genuine local rivals from up the road, rather than what we have now where the regions have a few games a season against the other Welsh regions, but then a load of games where you need a load of air miles in order to be able to go and watch your team play. But is that like a really naive and old-fashioned view? I suppose really the question is the problem that the WRU are seeking to fix here, is it about attendances and the financial viability of the clubs, or is it about the quality of the players that are getting developed through the regions?
Right, so let's not talk about 2003 because that's a separate pod on its own and we'd be here all night. We haven't got time for that. What is the problem? So the problem is that Welsh Rugby is in crisis. Not for the first time, of course. Welsh Rugby has had many crises, but I would say Welsh Rugby is at its lowest ebb since the game turned professional. You've got the men's team receiving back-to-back wooden spoons for the Six Nations and losing a record 18 test matches in a row. 644 days without a win. It was a very long time, wasn't it?
Even County have won in that time.
Exactly, even the Dragons. The Welsh regions are struggling in a very tough league. There's no salary cap in the URC, and the Welsh regions have been operating on reduced squads and playing budgets. That makes it hard to be consistently competitive. And they've basically been fighting with one arm tied behind their back. So it's been difficult for them. The under-20s are struggling. Wales women, I don't know if you've been following the World Cup. They've had a very difficult World Cup. Something has to change. I think everyone in Welsh Rugby knows that the status quo can't continue. However, is the WRU doing the right thing by cutting it to 2 teams? So as part of their One Wales strategy, the WRU have proposed cutting the number of professional teams from 4 to 2. So there are 4 models being considered. I'll just quickly run through them. So model A is 4 clubs with unequal funding. So you'd have like 2 teams full fat and 2 teams semi-skimmed, if you like. And then,
would the idea with that be that the semi-skimmed clubs, if you like, they'd be sort of development arms of the main 2, or like how would that work?
They'd be on less funding, and I suppose you could call them development teams, yes. We'd have 2 teams on more funding, and they would be more equipped to compete in the playoffs of the URC and in the top tier of European rugby, and then the other teams would obviously be more of a developmental on less funding. Model B is 3 clubs with equal funding. Model C is 3 clubs with unequal funding. And Model D, now this is what the union want, they want 2 clubs with equal funding. That's the preferred model of the union. There's also the potential of 2 new women's teams, and the WRU has also proposed the creation of a national campus. Now, when we say 2 teams, we don't know if that's 2 brand new entities. There's a lot of talk about East and West, or it could be 2 of the current teams. We just don't know. We don't have that information as of.
But if I've got it right, the 4 models that they've set out, the one that is their preferred one is also like the cheapest one for them to run, which doesn't feel like a coincidence. Is that right?
Yeah, so they would get larger budgets. These teams, I think it's 50 players each team. Obviously the women's team, it would be cheaper, and they are trying to cut costs here. That's the whole point of this. They say and they don't have the money or resources anymore to fund 4 professional teams, and that's probably right. So something has to change. Now the WRU insists that no decision has been made. There is a consultation happening with the club stakeholders and supporters, but if the WRU do decide to cut to 2 teams, that puts the Dragons in grave danger, and that would have a knock-on effect for Newport County and for professional sport in the city.
And I guess, we'll come on to that kind of knock-on impact and the implications for county and for the city. But I guess just to throw back to the question I started with, is it partly that the whole model of having regions that are dependent on the WRU for funding rather than it being based on TV deals and people coming through the gate like that, because God knows football is heavily dependent on TV income, but at the level that county find ourselves at, actually it's punters coming through the gate that basically pays the bills for the most part, whereas it seems to me like the Welsh regions, because they're used to having this tap of funding from the WRU, it therefore means that actually the WRU holds the cards rather than the club. So is it partly that? I mean, like I say, these are naive questions from someone who
No,
doesn't
not at all.
follow
So
that closely.
the clubs are reliant on funding. So we got 3 private businesses. Cardiff are now being taken over by the WRU because they went into administration. They're private businesses, yet they do rely heavily on WRU funding. But this is more to do with the impact on the national team. So when Wales were winning, the WRU didn't care about the regions. They didn't care, they didn't fix the roof when the sun was shining. Their concern was Wales winning. The problem is Wales aren't winning, and Welsh Rugby is in crisis. They're saying they don't have the funds anymore or the resources to fund 4 teams. That is why we are where we are now. If Wales weren't doing so, if Wales were better, we wouldn't be in this position. But they've lost 18 test matches in a row. The game is in crisis from grassroots to the region. So that's why we are where we are. And like I said, people recognise that we need change in Welsh Rugby. No one's saying we don't need it. No one's being naive. I just don't like this model that's being proposed, this Model D, their preferred model, because I think it'd be an absolute disaster. 2 new East and West teams. I mean, for example, where would they play? There's no details on that. What would they be called? Who would support them? 2 teams with no history. At least if you kept 2 of the current teams, you're disenfranchising 2 sets of supporters, which is still bad, but it's not as bad as if you disenfranchise 4 sets of supporters. So, we are where we are because of the national team, because the WRU have said, look, we can't fund 4 competitive teams anymore.
So you slightly anticipated the question I was going to ask then. So if the Dragons did disappear, what happens to their support? Because you said on your pod, and I agree, it's highly unlikely that thousands of Dragons fans based in or near Newport are going to compliantly jump on a bus or a train and go and watch the Cardiff-based region that is almost certain to continue given what the WRU have indicated. So do those fans revert to the old Newport RFC? Would their crowds be significant enough that Newport RFC could return to Rodney Parade, or is that kind of wishful thinking? Where you're a Dragons season ticket holder. Where does your support go if the Dragons disappear?
So I've got a backup plan. If the Dragons disappear, I will still carry on following Newport County, of course, wherever they play in. I did go over to Spitty last season to watch a few Newport RFC games, and I actually enjoyed it. It's very entertaining. I went to the festive derby between Cardiff, and it was from the best games of rugby I've seen for a long time. It was very entertaining. But it's a different kind of rugby. This is semi-pro rugby. This is developmental rugby. I guess it would depend on the individual. I guess some would take up a season ticket and go and watch Newport RFC. Of course, not every Dragon supporter is a Newport RFC supporter. Some will follow Pontypool, some will follow Ebervale, some will follow local teams like Cross Keys, Newbridge, and that's fine. What I think will happen, my fear is, I do think that some will walk away from the game completely because they've just had a gutful. And I also think as well, you're going to see a lot of people going over the bridge to watch Gloucester, Bristol and Bath in the English Premiership. they do have a good following in Wales.
Yeah.
The English Premiership clubs, particularly Bristol and Gloucester, because they got a lot of Welsh players. Very easily commutable from Newport to Gloucester and Bristol. So that's what I think will happen. My fear is that we lose people from Welsh rugby completely, or they'll just go over the bridge and watch English rugby, and that's when the English Premiership will benefit and Welsh rugby will miss out.
And there's no kind of chance that the Dragons could re-emerge as like a club side within the English setup or anything, is there? Like, because I've seen some people suggest that, but that seems to me like a bit of a non-starter.
Yeah, I'd say that's highly unlikely.
Because of the lack of WRU funding? Or
First of all, for the lack of WRU funding. Secondly, they would need permission from the WRU, from PRL, and from the RFU. So they would need approval from 3 governing bodies. The English...
This sounds like an awfully familiar scenario for Newport County fans to be thinking about.
But the English clubs have got to agree to it, mind.
Yeah.
You know, so it's no good saying, just get Dragons in the English Prem or the English Championship, as some people saying. Well, the English clubs might not want us. You know, there's a lot of hurdles to go through. So unfortunately, it's a nice idea. It's a nice theory, but in practice, it's probably a non-start. I'd say it's highly unlikely. What I would say, though, the 2 teams that are remain, is probably more likely that they would go into the English Premiership. I'd say that's more likely than the 2 teams that have been axed, because it's just a lot of hurdles to get through. And like I said, you need a lot of approval from various governing bodies.
Yeah. And so you've got your backup plan then, which is to go watch Newport RFC. But if it was down to you, if suddenly you were appointed as the new chief exec of the WRU, what would therefore be your preferred scenario out of those 4 options, or have you got a 5th one up your sleeve?
I would go with a 2+2, because that way you're keeping 4 teams. And look, no one wants to be a development team. I don't want Dragons to be a development team. Although, ironically, this has been a debate that's been happening for years, should Dragons be a development team? In an ideal world, I don't want that. However, would I prefer us to be a development team than not have a team at all? Well, yes. And I think if you asked supporters of the other teams, would you rather be a development team or lose your team completely? I think they're like most people would probably choose being a development team. That would be my preferred option, 2+2. Now, the difficulty is someone needs to agree to be a development team. So who's going to agree to less funding to be a development team? That's the one issue you've got. 3 teams, I quite like the sound of 3 teams again. I don't want to lose any teams. I want us to keep 4 teams. But I can see 3 teams working. I think that's a better model than going down to 2. But again, who gets cut? No one's going to agree to be cut, are they,
Yeah.
It's like turkeys thrown for Christmas. They would probably have to bring in another company, like a consultant company, and they probably have to make a decision there based on several factors and criteria. It won't be purely based on results, whoever goes. We had a Q&A over at the Dragons back in February. There's always been the talk of Dragons, being cut because of results, but it won't purely be down to results. There are other factors such as sustainability, ownership, who's the most profitable team going forward. So it won't be based purely on results. But for me, I would keep... Well, Model A, I think, is a decent option, 2+2. 3 teams, it's not ideal, but I think that's better than this 2-team East and West nonsense, quite frankly. But it's just a shame we've ended up in this scenario, really.
Yeah.
And the WRU have got to take responsibility for that. For their gross mismanagement and underfunding of the game. They didn't fix the roof when the sun is shining, and they haven't cared about the regions where Wales are winning. Now, unfortunately, Wales aren't winning, and now we are where we are. So, it's a lot of this is on the WRU, and that's what makes me pretty angry about it, to be honest.
I mean, it's a tragedy when any sports club disappears, and, not just for the fans, but for the community and businesses, which, we're doubtless coming to talk about. But selfishly, from the point of view of a Newport County season ticket holder, can I ask the big question, which is, if the Dragons disappeared, what happens to Rodney Parade? I don't know whether you saw it, but there was an excellent BBC Wales piece by a friend of both pods, I think, Chris Kerwin, formerly of this parish, who said, where's the quote, "Any changes could have a knock-on effect for Newport County, given the League 2 football club have a 10-year rolling lease for Rodney Parade, a requirement of the EFL. Their £500,000 a year rent, as well as other sporting fixtures, means Rodney Parade would remain a viable stadium even without top-flight rugby." Do you believe that's the case, Jamie?
I gotta be honest, I like Chris a lot, but I'm not sure about that. I'm really not sure. First of all, I cannot believe it's that much rent the county are paying. I am surprised by that figure, $500,000. It does seem an awful lot, doesn't it, for a League 2 club. If the Dragons are gone, it all depends what the owners decide to do. Will they keep the stadium for County? Could you have a scenario where they buy into Newport County? We know Newport County are looking for investors. I know that David Butcher was on your pod, wasn't he, in the past? And he talked about his dad being a massive Newport County fan. So there is a connection there, if David Butcher wanted to get involved, could that be one way to get involved and keep Rodney Parade? But
well, from his point of view, I mean, his investment with Rodney Parade means he needs pro sport to be there, so you would think that he's got a strong incentive, but I don't know, maybe he's got an eye on the long game as well. I mean, that's always the worry, is that land more valuable if you bulldoze down the stadium and build housing?
Well, let's not forget that's very prime land in Rodney Parade. They could make a tiny profit from that, couldn't they? So do they just decide, well, we've been shafted by the WRU, we had all these plans for the Dragons, we bought the stadium because that came with the Dragons, now we haven't got the Dragons, we might as well sell it for housing. I think that's the worry I got. If Dragons do go, and I think County fans should be worried about this as well. Don't just assume because you've got a lease that you're going to stay there, or the county. They can't afford to buy Rodney Parade, can they? They can't afford to buy it. I don't think he's a rich man, but I don't think he's got that amount of money to buy a stadium unless he had a consortium with him. That's my concern. Dragons go, Rodney Parade goes, County are homeless, and professional sport dies in the city. In an ideal world, I think if Dragons are to go, the ideal scenario would be County still play there and have Newport RFC return into Rodney Parade. That would be, in an ideal world, a good scenario. But the answer is, I don't know what's going to happen to Rodney Parade. I don't think anyone does. Until we get a decision, then it's hard to say what will happen. But I wouldn't just assume, like Chris has done, they can keep playing there. I'm not sure about that. It all depends on what the owners, David Buttress, Dai Wright and Ho Young Hu, decide to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. We've got the kind of rolling 10-year lease, which is the EFL requirement.
Yeah.
But 10 seasons actually goes quite quickly. If you've got to find another ground to play in, there's people saying, would it be a return to Spitty Park? But
So this is what I was going to ask you, Ed. What are the EFL requirements for a stadium, and does Spitty Park meet those requirements? Because when I've been over there to watch Newport RFC, I don't think that's a stadium that's fit.
Doesn't feel like a Football League ground, does it?
Well, maybe for non-league.
Yeah.
But for a League 2 club, that does not feel like a suitable venue in terms of the location, the facilities.
So I think you've got it in a nutshell that technically, and I'll explain why, it could be a Football League ground.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like a non-league ground, not just in terms of the facilities, but actually, are people going to want to go there? That's the problem. I mean, the answer is that, technically the requirement is met because the Football League requirement is there has to be a capacity of at least 5,000, of which 2,000 is seated. And Spitty Park, according to Wikipedia at least, listeners, it just about meets that requirement. It has a stated capacity of 5,058 with 3,246 seats. But like I say, the real question is that capacity realistic given the state of disrepair around the place? I mean, the shed terrace over the far side has been in a rough old state for years. And would that be a viable stadium for a league club, given how poor the facilities are? I just think it's a non-starter if Newport County have any aspiration to stay in the league. It would feel to me like the first step along a road towards reverting back into being a non-league club.
Yeah, I know. I'm a Newport County supporter as well, and I hope that doesn't happen. There is another problem as well. You've got two teams already playing over at Spitty. So you've got Newport RFC, that I mentioned earlier. You've also got Newport City Football Club. So I don't think that pitch is going to be able to handle three teams. It's going to cause so much complications, and logistics-wise, it's going to be a nightmare, isn't it?
I don't see how that stacks up. And again, if it was the only option in town, I'd accept it. But I wouldn't feel great if Newport County going back to Spitty meant that Newport City got dislodged. You don't want to be the bad guy in any of this. So I feel like, Newport County desperately need to be able to stay at Rodney Parade. But how do you make that happen? Like you say, the investment that's being talked about at the moment, I think, need to have that in mind, because the long-term future of Newport County, I think, is inextricably linked with staying at Rodney Parade.
So Dan, we're obviously focused a lot on the sport and implications, but this is something which could decimate Newport as a city. There's loads of businesses whose model is incredibly reliant on several thousand sports fans coming into the city centre every weekend who want to have a good time. Can you tell us what the effect would be on somewhere like the Riverside if the Dragons cease to exist?
if Dragons cease to exist and then County haven't got anywhere to play in the city centre, quite frankly, we'd be out of business. It's as simple as that. Hospitality is so difficult at this moment in time. The margins are so small. We're seeing pubs, bars, restaurants closing all the time. If the Dragons go under, cease to exist, whatever that is, and then that ground isn't available for County to use as well, that would do so much damage to us that I don't think we'd survive, and I think there'd be a couple of other pubs in the vicinity which would go under as well, because it's so finely balanced in hospitality. Like I say, the margins are so small, it's tough already. Having a match day, having County fans, having Dragons fans, having sport fans in general coming in here on a match day and enjoying what we've got to offer is the lifeblood for what we do. So I think it would be absolutely detrimental to us and a number of other businesses in this area.
Is it something that you think is like on the radar of local business? Because you speak to other business owners around Newport, but how many of them are aware that this is a thing that is happening, and that the WRU are deliberating, and that this could have a very real impact on their income?
I haven't spoken to too many of those around us about it, to be honest with you. But if it's not on their radar, they really need to think about it. So any business that is within a walking distance of Rodney Parade relies on match day activity need to be thinking about what that means for them. And for what I understand, these things won't happen overnight. The WRU would have to give 2-3 years notice or something like that before it all stopped. But I think it would be detrimental for us and others. And for rugby fans, I just think things are going to get worse, and people are just going to stop following rugby because it's getting more and more complicated. With Gwent Dragons, we're looking at the fixtures going, they're home this week, they're away next week, they don't play for 3 weeks, they're in South Africa for a fortnight. Then you don't know for certain what's going on with the Dragons when they're playing. It seems to be all or nothing and patchy, and we're kind of looking at the fixtures going, I think they're not home now for another couple of weeks. They're in South Africa for a couple of weeks. There's internationals on, they're not playing. So they already play very few games at home. So fans of Gwent Dragons don't have that many opportunities to go and watch their team. And then if they go out of business and it becomes 2 regions, east and west, or whatever people are talking about, I think people will just go, do you know what, it's not worth the effort anymore. I'm not going to bother watching that. Maybe they'll go and watch Pill Harriers and Cross Keys and other smaller clubs, which wouldn't be a bad thing, but professional sport in Newport just seems to be getting worse.
And I mean, you really heavily market yourself as being a sports bar, for sports fans to come into pre-match. I know you get plenty of away fans for the football. I guess it's slightly less with the rugby because South African teams are bringing loads of away fans and stuff. But I mean, it's not just the impact that has on your income, but it also changes kind of how you're able to position yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Like we say we're a sports bar. Well, anyone is welcome here as long as they're respectful. They're coming for a good time. They're going to respect others. If it's a bit of singing, a bit of banter, that's absolutely fine. If you want to fight and swear, then you can go somewhere else. We don't want any of that. We want to be family friendly. But you're right. It's like we position ourselves as the go-to sports bar, centre in Newport, stone's throw from Rodney Parade. We'll still be a sports bar, but then you're watching Man United, Liverpool, Champions League, whatever it is, and there's less professional sport than the centre of Newport. It just becomes a weird situation where Newport and one of its lifebloods, because Newport's been going downhill for a while, and then if you lose professional sport out of the city centre and more businesses go under, you're looking and think, well, what's the point of going into Newport at all?
Yeah, it's a fair point, and this is what the WRU have to understand and recognise, the knock-on effect. It's going to leave a hole in a lot of people's lives not having the Dragons there. They love their teams, they want to come to Rodney Parade and watch them, but also it's going to kill businesses like Dan's as well. So there's a severe knock-on effect by losing a team in the city centre. It's going to kill pro sport in Newport, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine not having Rodney Parade in Newport? Imagine the hole that will leave. I mean, it's not the most perfect or beautiful of stadiums for Rodney Parade, is it? But honestly, I love the place. It's my second home. It's got a lot of character, a lot of history, a lot of warmth. Give me Rodney Parade any day over some soulless out-of-town stadium on a retail park, It would be a huge loss to Newport if Rodney Parade was gone. And there is a risk of that happening. And people need to understand that.
And that's it. Like Newport Rugby, they're playing over Spitty. It's pretty soulless over there. It's difficult to get to. Any away fans that are coming to Newport, they get off the train, then they got to figure out what bus they get on. God knows what route that bus takes to get all the way across to that side of Newport.
And then when you
Same.
get there, what you don't have is somewhere like this where you can have a game of pool, have
Pubs, food,
all of that.
entertainment, and all that sort of stuff. But it's tricky over there. Do you know what I mean, if you're driving over, parking, going to see the game, that's fine. But if you want some sort of night out or day out, it becomes difficult over Spitty because there just isn't anything in the area.
So we're spoiled by the location of Rodney Parade. It's easy to get to. It's right in the heart of the city centre. Like I said, it's unthinkable for me for Newport not to have Rodney Parade.
Well, it is no coincidence that in the time the county have been at Rodney Parade, attendances have basically quadrupled. You know, that's not an accident. That's because people want to come into the city centre, make a day of it, go to the shops, have a bite to eat, come to the pub, stay around afterwards. And like you say, if you've got to schlep out to Spitty Park on the bus and be in a windswept retail park, that's not the same atmosphere, you know.
Not at all.
No, and it's accessible, make it easy for people to go out and enjoy themselves. Your match day experience is impacted by how accessible it is and what other facilities there are around it. So going out to Spitty, it could be the best football in the world out there. But if you've got to get on 2 buses and then you can't get a pint and then, do you mean the food's not very good? It just ruins your match day experience, and that's what it's about. It's not about the quality of the football, it's about the match day experience, meeting friends, chatting, catching up with people, enjoying people's company, and that's why being in a city centre with the facilities that are all around it, people can come and enjoy themselves and go and watch a game of rugby or a game of football. If you then got to travel and meet people in all sorts of weird, wonderful places, it's not the same.
No, at all. The facilities are not great over Spitty, and the location is awful. Like I said, we're spoiled by Rodney Parade by its location, but it's a real concern. And as you said, Dan, this is going to have a huge impact on your business, isn't it? So you must be worried and eagerly anticipating this WRU consultation.
Oh, hospitality at the moment, every week there's something you think, oh Christ, what's going to happen next? Do you know what I mean? What's going to go up in costs? What's going to go down? What's going to go sideways and impact your business? Like I say, hospitality is so difficult at this moment in time. If we lose professional sport in the city centre, I think there's a number of businesses that'll just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, 100%.
The other partner in this we've not talked about, we talked about Newport Dragons, we talked about Newport County, we talked about Rodney Parade, but like, where in Newport Council in all of this? Because like you say, that's prime land. They have been pretty clear that they see professional sport as being important for the city, but saying that and then having the actions to back it up, I think are 2 different things. You know, the politicians are always very happy to jump on the bandwagon when County or the Dragons have a big game and
FA Cup days.
FA Cup days.
We've all seen that.
And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is actually when you find out who your friends really are. And I would love to know what's their plan. You know, is it on their radar, and if so, what steps are they willing to take? Once you start having big empty spaces in your city centre, you can't just keep filling everything with housing, because shock horror, people actually want to go and enjoy themselves as well as just having somewhere to live.
Exactly. In fairness to Dimitri Petruni, the leader of Newport City Council, now he has publicly said we must retain Dragons LFC in Newport and Gwent. Newport City Council will continue to support and work in lockstep with the club to maintain professional elite rugby in our city and region, which is good. He's publicly said that. Jane Bryant, the MS for Newport West, she's voiced her support on social media. She's a Newport County and Dragon supporter. So we know the council are supportive, but actions speak louder than words. We need more councillors coming forward. And we also need more local politicians. But it's a fair point you make, though, Ed, because it's all very well coming out and saying, yeah, you know, we want to keep rugby here, we support, but what are you going to do about it? You know, because like I said, action speaks louder than words.
Well, and there was all this talk a little while ago, and I think you talked about it on your pod, about the cabbage patch next to the ground and what's going to happen with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, there should be a vision, and I gather there are thoughts there around how that could be a sport park for the community. Well, that's a great idea. But if you haven't got the pro sports clubs in the stadium next to it, then it's, you know, that kind of doesn't really stack up. So all of this it all comes back to the same thing. We need to keep pro rugby, pro football in the city.
No, 100%. The 2 teams need each other. Yeah. That's the reality. So County need Dragons because they need Rodney Parade, they need a home to play at, a suitable venue. It's the best stadium in Newport and Gwent, let's be honest, the most suitable stadium for pro sport. The Dragons need County for the revenue. You know, they earn rent from them, food and drink revenue. They are an important revenue stream for the Dragons. So it's good for both teams to remain at Rodney Parade, and that's why they both need a collaborative approach. We need a collaborative approach from both clubs, from the city's politicians, from the councillors. We basically need everyone to stand up and make their feelings heard and actually do something about it and not just say,
The consultation's open now, right? Did it open today? Is that right?
Today, 1st of September. So there is a public consultation as well. There is a
It's all happening today. We got consultation opening, transfer deadline day. It's all kicking off around.
It's exciting, isn't it? Yeah. So supporters have the opportunity to make their voices and feelings heard. And that's a good thing. But the question is, will the WRU listen? That's my concern, because for anyone who's followed Welsh Rugby, we know that listening is not the WRU's strongest suit. So that's my concern. Have they already made up their mind? And this consultation is just a tick box exercise? Or are they actually going to listen to the concerns and business owners? And people like, Dan as well. They need to listen to the business owners and everyone involved in the area, because it's going to have such a detrimental knock-on effect from City of Newport and Gwent.
So go on then. You've alluded to it, Jamie. What are the WR going to do? Will they listen? Can they be influenced? Let's have some predictions. What's going to happen?
Well, we know what Dave Reddin, Abby Tierney and Richard Collier would want. They want 2 teams, East and West. Now, the WRU executive have made their decision, but it requires board approval. So far, the board have only approved the consultation process, so they are the people to put pressure on. There is a 6 weeks consultation period with stakeholders before a final decision, which is expected by the end of October. Now, I have spoken to people at the Dragons, and the owners are fighting hard for survival. If the Dragons are cut, I'm pretty confident they will take legal action. So I don't know if you remember, but back in May, the Dragons signed a new 5-year PRA deal. This was the professional rugby agreement. Now, they believe...
That was the one that the Dragons and Cardiff signed?
That's right.
Right? And the other 2 didn't?
Yeah, so Dragons signed it because they're owned by the union, so they had no choice. Ospreys and Scarlets didn't sign it because of concerns that the WRU were going to turn Cardiff into a super club. They had concerns they were going to get more money than the others, so they didn't sign it out of principle. And then the deadline was gone and they just didn't get everyone to sign it, so there's been a big hoo-ha about that. But Dragons signed this deal, and they believe there is a legally binding contract that secured their future. They also submitted a legal side letter. Now, this is what the chairman, David Wright, told the Argus back in May after he signed the deal. He said, "We signed with legal assurances that we believe are sound. We produced, articulated and agreed a legal side letter that we believe, with our lawyers, gives us enough legality should we want to fight." So I think they were anticipating legal action before they even signed this agreement, to be honest. I think they could sense something was coming down the line, which is probably smart of them to do. The 3 of us, meaning the owners, have run billion-pound businesses and dealt with legal people for many years. We all believe the document we have signed gives us enough leverage and that there were sound business reasons to sign it. So they could have a very good legal case if they do decide to cut the Dragons, and I think it could get quite messy if I'm being honest.
Well, that was my other question is, could this end up actually just being in an interminable legal dispute that means that we could have the Dragons for a good few years more while all of this kind of trundles its way through the courts?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, there's been reports that the WRU could force these changes through by next season. I think that's fairly wishful thinking. There's going to be legal challenges. According to Wales Online, Ospreys and Scarlets have already started legal action. They didn't even sign the PRA agreement. The Dragons did. They have signed a legally binding contract. So, of course, they've got a strong legal case, I think, to say, well, hang on, we signed this contract in good faith. We believe to secure our future. And now you're saying that we could be cut. So they're not going to stand by and let that happen. And that's the good thing. They are going to fight hard for the future of the club and for the future of Rodney Parade. So we'll see what happens. I haven't got a clue what the outcome is going to be. The mood music is we're going to go down to 2 clubs. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I'm not going to lie, I am preparing for the worst.
That's a bit of a gloomy note to end on.
It is, I'm sorry, but I have to be honest as well, Like I said, I'm positive that the owners will fight really hard for us. We've got good owners. David Buttress is a good guy, as you know, you've had him on your pod. David Wright, Toyon Pugh. They do care about the Dragons. They want to make this work. Ironically, we've got the best owners that we've ever had, I think. So it's a real shame it's come to this, but fingers crossed, we will see. I'm optimistic, but I'm not going to lie, I am sort of fearing the worst. And like I said, as a Newport County supporter as well, I really don't want County to be going over Spitty.
Well, I mean, it would also just be deeply tragic for the same city to, lose both its football club and its rugby club within a few decades of each other. I mean, it just feels like there's something cursed about Newport if that happens. And Dan, I better let you have the last word. As the proud sponsor for both of our podcasts, tell us what's happening at the Riverside. You've got a new menu going on, coming into the new season. What else is there that people should be aware of?
Yeah, in the Riverside, we got fantastic food. Everyone who comes and eats here says they love the food. So we're trying to get more people to come down and eat. We've just launched our food challenge, 30 quid, 2 burgers, fries, a load of sides. Eat it in 30 minutes, you get it for free. I think it's doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. And then we've also got radio ads going out on Capital in the Gwent area from September through to November as well. So we're having a push on trying to get people down here to eat the food, because the food is amazing here. A new menu,
I can
burgers,
confirm.
beef burgers, chicken burgers, fried chicken. We've got really great food and everyone enjoys it. So we want more people to come down Monday to Friday and eat, because that helps us as a business become more sustainable.
Yes, we will put a link in the show notes to the consultations. Have your say, lobby your councillors and your MSs and your MPs, or anyone you can, and yeah, as we've said, it's in everyone's interest, rugby and football fans alike, that actually we show a bit of common cause on this. So let's do that. We will go and order ourselves another drink and an amazing Riverside burger, and we'll catch up again soon.
Cheers.
Ta-ra.
Well, what an illuminating listen. Yeah, that was really quite something. And, you know, we will be watching future movements with great interest, of course. We'd love to hear as well what you thought of the discussion, what your thoughts are of the whole Dragons, WRU, and the wider Rodney Parade ramifications. So if you do have any thoughts on any of those points raised, please do drop us a note in the socials. We'd love to hear from you as well to keep that conversation going. That's it for us. Yeah, it's been a busy old week. We've had the podcast out from last weekend's Bristol Rovers match, and we will be back this weekend with our trip to Tranmere. Our man on the Northern Beat, Mr. Ian Street, will be in attendance and will be recording live throughout. So we can't wait to hear his report on hopefully a point or even 3 points away from home to stop this rotten run. And for those of you who didn't listen to last Monday's episode, we do have another special announcement as well. After the home game against Gillingham on the 20th of September, we'll be recording live from the Riverside Sports Bar. We'd love for anyone who's interested to come along, and hopefully we'll be putting that out as well as a special episode. Again, hopefully after a couple more points in the bag. Right, that's it from us this week. Just remains me to say thanks to the Dragons Lair pod guys. Thanks to Ed for sitting down and discussing. Thanks to all you listeners as well for your comments on the socials, your kind donations on Ko-Fi. Until then, though, as always, keep it catty.